want to talk a little bit about the Schwa was here and where this idea came from. I was speaking at a school. It was a school library. There were about 100 kids in the audience, and I was answering questions. About halfway through the presentation, a teacher in the back of the room waved to get my attention and pointed and said, "This boy has had his hand up for the whole period and you have not called on him." So, I try to get to every kid that has their hand up. I don't want to leave anybody out. I look to where she's pointing. She's pointing at an empty seat. So I look back at the teacher, wondering what's up with this teacher. She points again, and I look back, and now there's a kid sitting in the chair who was not there a split second ago. So I'm a little freaked out. I'm trying to figure out, did I not get enough sleep? Did I need more coffee? What was it? For what reason did I not see this kid when I was looking at him? First of all, he was wearing a shirt that was the exact same color as the chair, so he was blending in. And he did have his hand up, but there was a pole in the room that was going up behind his arm that was the same color as his skin tone. So he was basically camouflaged in every way in that room. And he had this look on his face, as so many teenagers have, just this absolute and utter resignation. It was like, this is my life. And I realized that this kid hasn't just been ignored today. This is the kid who always gets ignored, who is habitually left out, who never gets the attention. His picture will probably get left out of the school yearbook. We all know students like that. We all know this. No matter how hard we try to remember them, they always send. We feel so guilty. We feel so bad when we forget them the next time. But yet we can't stop not noticing them. He happened to be sitting in front of the dictionary that every library has, and I made this weird connection. I thought about the Schwa, and I said, this kid's kind of like a human Schwa. This unnoticeable character, the most unnoticed sound in the English language. And I thought, well, what if a kid really was a human Schwa? What if he was so unnoticeable, it was on the border of being supernatural? He always seems to be standing right in your blind spot. He could be in a group of kids, and you would never know that he was there. And I thought, well, this kid would have a lot of abilities. They could use him to send him into the teacher's lounge to spy on the teacher, because the teacher just wouldn't even notice that he was in there. But how did he get that way? Is it genetic, or did this develop over time? I thought, well, what if this happened to his mom? What if his mom was in the supermarket and disappeared down the frozen foods aisle and nobody noticed? And so, in the middle of this presentation, all of these ideas are flying through my mind. When an idea starts to take hold like that, it just starts to eat me up alive, and I'm trying to answer questions, but my mind is spinning out of control with this idea. At the end of the period, I went to my notebook and I scribbled out a couple of pages, which became pretty close to the opening 2 pages of the Schwa was here. Very rarely will it happen where the voice of the story just comes. So I knew that I couldn't tell the story from the point of view of the kid being noticed. It had to be another person telling the story. So I came up with this character by the name of Antsy Banana, who is the opposite of the Schwa. He's this loud-mouthed, kind of obnoxious, in-your-face kind of kid who you couldn't possibly not notice. Except, like every kid, in his own family, he feels like he's the one who's not getting any attention. And he might be loud, but everybody else is louder than him, which makes him the quiet one in the family. So I wanted him to be able to relate to the Schwa, but at the same time be the opposite. I want to read just a little bit from the Schwa that was here. By the way, the original title wasn't going to be The Schwa Was Here. The original title was just going to be Schwa. And I really wanted to be artsy about it. It wouldn't even have a word. It would just be The Schwa. That would be the title. And the publisher said, I don't think so. So they've had this experience where they run into this kid who nobody noticed was there. And Antsy decides he's going to go do some investigation to find out more about this kid, because there's like legends about this kid, that his eyes change color to match the color of the sky, that if he's standing in front of a sign and you look at him long enough, you could read what's written on the wall behind him. All of these rumors, nobody knows if they're true. So he does some investigation. Now, there's 2 friends with him. Howie, there's Ira, who is kind of a little bit like me when I was a kid. He always has a movie camera and he's always trying to film something. And then there's Howie, who is the kind of kid who never thinks out of the box, but if you told him that, he scratches his head wondering what box you were talking about. We sat on the floor and I told him what I found out in the course of my investigation. I'm not 100% sure how the Schwa got his last name, but my aunt's hairdresser's brother is his next door neighbor, so the story must be pretty reliable. The story goes like this. The Schwa's great-grandparents came over from the old country. Which old country? Asks Howie. I don't know. One of those old countries over there. China's an old country, says Howie. He doesn't look Chinese. He means somewhere in Eastern Europe, Ira said. Anyway, I said, his great-grandfather's last name is Schwartz. And for his whole life, all great-grandpa Schwartz wants to do is get out of the old country and come to America, because the Statue of Liberty's got this invitation. Give me you're tired, you're poor, you're reeking homeless. Huddled masses, said Ira. Give me you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. Yeah, says Howie. If you're going to misquote something, at least misquote it right. Okay, fine. So like everybody in the old country says, hey, I'm a huddled mass, and they all want to come over. That's how come my great-grandparents came from Italy, and why Ira's came from Russia, and why yours, Howie, came from the moon. So anyway, old man Schwartz, he's stewing out there on his beet farm or whatever, saving his pennies to buy a ticket for himself and his wife and kids so he can take a boat to America. I want to die on American soil, he says. Finally, he saves up enough money, and they pack him on a boat with like 14,000 other families, and they cross the Atlantic Ocean. Don't tell me they hit an iceberg, says Howie. Different boat, I said. But around the same time, I guess. Anyway, they get into New York Harbor, past the Statue of Liberty. Everyone's staring up at the flame, going ooh and ah, like tourists without Hawaiian shirts, because you know they're poor, they can't afford Hawaiian shirts. And they let everybody off the boat at Ellis Island, and they get in this long line, standing in the hot sun, all sweaty in heavy coats, because these people don't yet know to dress for the weather, because it's always sub-zero in the old country. Finally, they get to the front of the line. Old man Schwartz, he's sweating from the heat and hyperventilating from the excitement. There's this guy in front of the line with a fountain pen and a big, fat, black book, taking down names and letting it into the country. He says, your name, sir? And get this. The old man says, Schwa. Then puts his hand over his heart, has a massive heart attack, and drops dead on the spot. He got his wish, says Howie. He died on American soil. Yeah. So anyway, those guys at Ellis Island, they were like your cafeteria workers of today. They didn't care what they stuck you with as long as they got you through the line. So they marked down the family name as Schwa, and it's been that way ever since. Ira, who had been quiet for most of the story, finally spoke up. That's not all I heard. I turned to him. What'd you hear? Weird stuff. Not just about him this time, about the whole family. Weird like Twilight Zone weird, Howie asked? Or weird like Eyewitness News weird? I don't know, said Ira. Maybe a little bit of both. I heard his mom went into the market one day and disappeared right before everyone's eyes in the 10 items or less line. Nothing was left but a pile of coupons and a broken jar of pickles where she stood. Disappeared, I asked. What do you mean disappeared? Yeah, said Howie, and why a pile of coupons if all she had was a jar of pickles? It's just what I heard. Then Ira gets real quiet. Of course, there's another story. Some say the Schwa's father cut her up into 50 pieces and mailed each piece to a post office box in a different state. Not Puerto Rico, says Howie? Puerto Rico's not a state, I reminded him. It's almost a state. Fine, so maybe he saved a piece of her to send to Puerto Rico when it becomes a state. Okay, are you happy? To tell you the truth, I didn't believe either of Ira's stories. If any of this stuff happened, the whole neighborhood would know about it, wouldn't they? Ira leaned in close and smirked. Not if it happened before he moved here. When did he move here? Asked Howie. But neither Ira or I knew for sure. The thing is, there are always kids moving in and out of neighborhoods, and no matter how quietly a kid tries to come into a new school, he can't do it without being noticed. But the Schwa did. I guess he kind of slipped in under everybody's radar, I said. Has anyone bothered to check if the color of his eyes really changes? Howie asked. I don't want to get that close, said Ira. Thank you.